Hi there, welcome to video number 6. It's not particularly related to the 152, but this is the one that I've decided to experiment with on this one. I'm going to look today at taking the controls away from the Microsoft profiles and putting them onto X's and O's and seeing what difference that makes. The reason behind it is that if I change aircraft, it doesn't. Microsoft doesn't detect that, so I have to remember to change these profiles. In fact, it's the rudder one I don't need to change particularly, but I did put it in as an experiment because my obviously the rudder control pedals will do the same for every aircraft. It'll be brakes and the rudder itself. But this one here might change because I changed the allocation, or particularly with the 152, I changed the allocation of the blue lever on my throttle quadrant, which is normally allocated to the propeller pitch, and I allocated that to the carburetor heat. So I wanted to be and adjust that so that it would work with X's and O's, because as you know, X's and O's automatically picks up which aircraft you're in. So if I build the profile here for the different aircraft, it doesn't matter what's in here, so I don't have to bother changing particularly the primary flight controls. I'll do the primary flight controls first, and then I'll talk about an issue that I had with deciding what to do with other buttons that are actually on my yoke. So if I just work through this here, and so I put up X's and O's, and these are the ones that I have allocated, and they're quite easy to do, but you must remember to go into the system here. So in my primary flight controls here, everything has been deallocated. I've taken off the aileron axes and the roll left and roll right, and everything there has now been removed from here, so that's not going to interfere, and it's all controlled here on X's and O's. And so it's quite easy then for me to change that to back to propeller pitch or something like that. So having gone into here and removed those, so the usual thing of clicking on an assigned item and de-assigning it, if that's a word. Let's show you one in action. Let's put, I've got my trimming surfaces still here, so if I wanted to get rid of this one here, click on there, I would clear current input and press validate, and that'll be gone. Okay, so that's what I've done. Let's cancel that. That's what I've done on the primary control surfaces, and I've done the same here in my rudder pedals. That you'll see the brakes have now all gone completely from there, and flight control surfaces, rudder's gone, so that's all taken away from my rudder. Strange things they put into the rudder, but there you are. Okay, let's go back to here. So primary flight controls all removed from there, and they're all now in X's and O's. And I found this fairly simple, but there's a couple of little things to show you. So if you go in, it's a normal thing if you wanted to add another one. Imagine I was going to add an aileron. Most of them are here in Axis already, so you can put in the aileron, and then you just tweak a device, it finds out what you've got, and you just click add, and it's done. Obviously I won't do that one because aileron is already allocated. So that one was set. I did that in a previous video. Left brake set and right brake set were interesting. It has got brake left and brake right here, but they don't work very well. You press the brake left and hold down the left toe or the right toe, and they only happen for a second or two and then release. That they wouldn't hold down even though you've got your foot still down. So that was not the way forward to do it. let's come out of that. And I discovered that the best way to do it was to set it as a simulator event and pick it up from here. So if I put in the brake here and apply the filter, flight control axes, these ones here are the best ones to use, brake left and brake right, that they work as expected, and it automatically puts in the correct values here. So that's what I've gone with. If I cancel that, and let's wander back into my actual aircraft. Just momentarily I'll take the parking brake off, and you can see here my toe brakes working properly, and they hold the aircraft. So let's go back into my control options, and axes and O's. So the left brake axis and the right brake axis axes are best done as simulator events, just so pull those down and use those. I won't know if that's the same for other aircraft until I start to program that up for other ones, but I guess it will be, so that's better than that. And elevator, dead easy to set, just using it from this drop down list here, and it puts everything in. Again, I've got it set for on change, so it's not continuously sending information. It's only when I actually pull and push on there that it will send. So that seems to work quite well. And the rudder, that works again perfectly well with the Cytex system. I've just chosen rudder there, and that's put in the correct values. What I have done with that is I have put here a dead zone, because the mechanical nature of the rudder, it doesn't always quite center when I release. It is this morning, but it kind of depends on the temperature of the room and possibly dust in the device. So I've got a tiny bit of a dead zone in there, and you just do that by clicking here, and I'm rolling with the center part of the mouse, so you can set the dead zone. It probably doesn't need to be as big as I've got it, but it just helps it find the center. And you can then switch on the curve button so that it picks up this curve here. I haven't really experimented with these too much. Don't seem to do very much difference. It's a fairly aggressive curve that we've got. If I go back out here, let's and if I bring my camera in, and let's put this on here. But initially the turn is fairly gradual and they stay together, but as you get past the point here, it becomes quite an aggressive turn. But I tend not to bank that hard anyway in a GA aircraft, so I'm going to work with it. I might fiddle later and see if I can get a better curve on that, but that's how that works. Okay, so that's working fine. This is where I came across one or two issues, and I've kind of backtracked on what I'm thinking. I've got my buttons here set to control various views, so if I'm in cockpit views, I don't use them very much because I mostly fly with my head tracker, but I've got these so that I can move these around on my sort of hat view type thing. So it goes through various views of the cockpit, and the button on the back here, there's a hidden button around the back, puts me into instrument view so I can switch across and use the hat switch to switch to the various different instrument views that are available to me, and I can come back out of that into normal cockpit view. So it's pressing that back button there, and that's how this works. I've also got a button allocated on, let's get down to that, on my throttle quadrant. So if I press the right hand, there's a rocker switch on the bottom of the right hand side lever, which is normally mixture, and that takes me to drone mode. And again, I'm using the same buttons here to push to lower and raise and to translate left and right. And I'll use these buttons here for the pitch up, pitch down and yaw of the drone. So if I do go into drone mode, those are quite useful. The red button here is my push to talk if I want to use voice recognition, speech recognition for ATC controller. So that's what that's allocated to. But that's there. But in my normal mode, this would be allocated to my trim. So if I just go and look down here, that's my elevator trim, working fine. And this one here is allocated to the rudder trim, but obviously there's no rudder trim in a 152, but there are for other aircraft, so that's for my rudder trim. I haven't got an aileron trim allocated to anything at the moment, so I think rudder trim and elevator trim are more common. This is where the issue came. What I did initially was, if I go back out here and into control options, let's go for all of my flight control services, that I did deallocate my rudder trim and my elevator trim here from here, and I added them into X's and O's over here so that they were there. And unfortunately what happened there was it didn't detect which mode it was in. So I'll show you that working here. Let's bring this back here, and if we go back and resume my flight, if you keep your eye on the indicator here, obviously when I use my trim in normal mode, you'll see the indicator moving up and down. And if I go into drone mode here, using the same button, I'll do a couple of massive rotations, so it's as if the trim had been held down for ages. And if I go back to here, you'll see the indicator hasn't moved at all. But if I allocated the trim not to the Microsoft control but to X's and O's control, it didn't detect that I had entered drone mode. So when I return to my aircraft, you'll find that I've applied a whole lot of elevator trim, or if I used this button here, it would have put rudder trim or nose trim in. So I've had to go back to where I was before. And to be honest with you, those buttons are pretty well set. That's always going to be my elevator trim, that's always going to be a rudder trim. And in X's and O's, there's no way of allocating controls to the drone itself. If you go here and try to look for drone, apply the filter, there's absolutely nothing. Not really anything very useful in here for us. Which cameras, but so it's not. There's no drone there. There's a couple of scripts I tried to write to get things to work. So I have gone back and on my control options here, on there, I have gone back to adding, if I search by input, let's do that input there, you can see it's got both B1 allocated to the pitch, drone down, drone camera, and the nose down for the trim, and it detects for itself which mode you're in, whether you're in drone mode or flight control if you're flying. So having these double allocated isn't a problem. As long as you don't get X's and O's involved in it, then it does become a problem. So that's really what I've done there. So in theory, I shouldn't ever have to worry about this changing now or this until perhaps I've got another throttle quadrant thread if I go for dual engine, twin engine flight. So I might have to do a bit more fiddling and create another allocation here, but I don't think so at the moment. What I do have to do is to work on here and make sure that everything's working there, and then I'm going to have to save that as a template. So let's have a look at managing these templates. So what I've got here is the one that I've taken the trim controls out of here, so there should be no rudder trim and no elevator trim, and I can save that current setup as a template, which I've done here by typing the name, clicking save, and there it is, the AAO axis with no trim. So that saved everything here, and if I cancel that, if I swap aircraft, I've not used the Bonanza, that's quite close on here, and so let's apply an inappropriate template, I have to say, to the Bonanza. And let's apply this template here. And it's going to be this one here, the axis with no trim, so we'll bring that in, and there's everything brought into this aircraft, but that's really not what I want to happen. So let's clear that one there, so we're not going to use that. Let's go back to my 152 and we'll look at a more selective output for this one here. So if I go to my templates, export a template, and this time I'm going to be selective on my one here, so a selective output, and what I want to output is the flight yoke system with all those allocations. I'll put out the voice commands, which are my ATC calls, because they'll be the same, and obviously my pedals. So if we export that, and I keep them on drive D, axis and O's, and my templates there, and I want to put it out here. I've already done it here, so we'll overwrite that. Export's now finished, that'll go away, and that's great. So I've now exported, in theory, just that and the voice commands and the buttons that are allocated to the yoke. So if I now go back to my Bonanza, and if I want to apply that yoke, it's not there. It's because this is internal. This is what I've saved internally here onto AAO. What I want to do is to import that template back in again, which we know is in here, and I want to bring back this voice yoke rudder. So if we import that, and we have to save a few items. I'm not quite sure why it does that every time, but there we are. We will go save that. That will finish the import. So that's done now. So now if I look at my templates, apply a template, you will see that there's no voice rudder yoke option here, but it has added the axis no trim and a new version of that in there, and that's the one I want to apply, the new version. In fact, I will come back and rename that later, but if we just check it out first of all and apply, and it's done what I wanted it to do. It's brought in the basic allocation there, and it's brought in the voices. So I'm now ready to build a new template here for whatever's needed. So that worked fine. But we need to edit the templates, because calling it that, I'll never remember in a few weeks' time what that is. So we need to rename that something sensible, like the voice yoke rudder. So I'll remember that. And let's just check that's done. So we will now look at the templates. Nope, still not there, so we'll have to edit that again. Edit templates. That's checking it out, that's the one I want to do, and we're going to rename. There we are, that's now voice wrote. So that's the way that you do that, and we'll just check that it's there. It might apply a template. Yep, Axis voice wrote yoke rudder, so we're okay with that. So that's my take on the templates at the moment, and let's see how that develops over time. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video.